You know, according to the Canadian Cancer Society, nearly 80 people in this country every day hear the words, "You have breast cancer." And while more people are surviving that disease than ever before, it is still the most common cancer and second leading cause of cancer death among Canadian women. Our guest tonight is working to lower those numbers even more. Dr. Paola Marignani is a medical professor at Dalhousie and a breast cancer researcher who's just been awarded $250,000 from the Breast Cancer Society to further her research into precision oncology. Real pleasure to have you here tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Bruce.
Let's talk a little bit about breast cancer rates. How have they been trending in the last 10 years, up or down?
So over the past 10 years, the trends are on the decline. So there's less cases of breast cancer across the country. And so this is good news. And in part, this is because we have fantastic screening strategies in place like mammography. And so this has helped quite a bit to reduce the number of cases. And more importantly, the number of deaths due to breast cancer. But in Canada alone in 2022, there were 28,900 cases of breast cancer, of which 5,500 people did die from breast cancer this year alone.
Yeah,
Within that, there were 270 men diagnosed with breast cancer in 2022, of which there will be some deaths amongst the men as well. So breast cancer is now presenting in men as well as women.
And where does the Maritimes fit into this? Are our numbers generally higher or lower than the national average?
We're on a bit of the high side. In 2022, 770 women were diagnosed with breast cancer, and it's estimated that 180 will die. And there were 10 men diagnosed, and roughly 5 men will die from breast cancer this year. So the Maritimes are on par with New Brunswick. New Brunswick has approximately 610 cases in 2022. And so Atlantic Canada is on a bit of the higher side compared to the other provinces.
Okay, I'd like to really kind of get into the weeds here about your specific research, but I want to make sure that you don't lose me because you are, you know, a molecular biologist. So the news release said the project aims to identify unique markers associated with HER2 plus breast cancer recurrence at the single cell level. Tell us what that means, what you're hoping to accomplish.
So there are different types of breast cancer, and one type of breast cancer is called HER2 positive breast cancer. And this is where there's a high level of a protein in the breast tissue called HER2. Now, under normal circumstances, we all have HER2 protein circulating in our body, in different parts of our body. And under normal circumstances or healthier circumstances, this protein is doing its job. However, in HER2 positive breast cancer, for whatever reason, there is more of this protein. And because there is more of this protein, there is more activity around the protein and there's more function. And this is bad. And so if a woman is diagnosed with HER2 positive breast cancer, that means they just have too much of this protein in their breast tissue.
And I understand that, as you say, a significant number of cases fall into that classification, and drugs targeting it have generally been successful, except that the cancer often comes back.
Yes. So the treatment right now is a biological, and it's called trastuzumab, or commercial name is Herceptin. And it's worked beautifully. It is an excellent biological treatment. However, there is a percentage of the women that their breast cancer will recur or return. And the reason it returns is not exactly fully known. And so the overarching goal of our project is to try and identify new markers or biomarkers that are involved in the recurrence. Why does HER2 positive breast cancer come back, despite the fact that the treatments are actually really quite good?
And this is not a short-term project, right? Like you'll be working on this for, I think it's the next 3 years?
Yes, this particular project is for 3 years. And so we have a 3-year window to try and use all the molecular tools that we have in our toolbox to try and identify at the very molecular level, at the single cell level, potentially new markers for recurrence.
The targeted cancer treatments are really amazing, aren't they? Like they're a game changer in fighting the disease. A lot of us remember a time when chemo was arguably worse than the cancer.
Yes, I don't know if I remember that time, but yes, I do remember. It is true that sometimes the therapy is actually more difficult for the patient than the actual disease. So even though the treatments are wonderful and they help, for whatever reason, there is a percentage of women that don't respond or the cancer comes back. And so it's really important that we try and identify new proteins, new genes that are responsible for this recurrence. You know, if there's 10 women in a room that are HER2 positive breast cancer, 2 to 3 of those women will not respond, despite the fact being diagnosed with the same cancer as the other women. So this becomes a challenge for the oncologists and, of course, for the patient and their families.
So if all goes well, any idea how long it would be before some of the drugs, could be modified and be available to patients?
If all goes well, the outcome or the final product of our research will be the identification of new biomarkers.
Right.
And the ultimate goal will be able to say which women will have a more probability of recurrence.
Right.
Because if we can identify these women, then we could potentially do something. Or if we have a handle of the type of genes that are involved and therefore the proteins that are involved, we may be able to then proceed with the development of targeted therapies that will go after those new targets. That's the long goal, right?
Right, of course, yeah. What's your message then for cancer patients tonight who may have heard those life-changing words in recent days? You have breast cancer. What do you want them to know?
I believe that being diagnosed with breast cancer or any cancer, we used to think of it as a death sentence. But we have to really believe that the science is supporting and coming up with new treatments, new therapies, new approaches to solve their cancer. I don't believe it's a death sentence any longer. I think we need to change the narrative for people with breast cancer and in cancer in general, and that there is hope. And so many more people are surviving their cancer today than 20 years ago, than 50 years ago. And so there has been advances for the treatment of breast cancer and other cancers. And so I think you have to have hope and believe in the science, believe that the scientific teams, the medical teams, the healthcare professionals, everybody is working together to try and solve breast cancer. And I think I really want people living with their cancer to not be fearful of their future, to live their life knowing that there are people, scientists and clinicians out there trying to solve their disease. You have to live and manage your cancer and thrive and embrace every day. We've just gone through 2 years of a pandemic.
Right.
And we can get through many things. We really can.
Well said. We'll leave it there, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Dr. Paola Marignani is a medical professor at Dalhousie, a breast cancer researcher who's just been awarded $250,000 from the Breast Cancer Society to further her research into precision oncology. She joined us tonight from Halifax with some of the details. Stay with us. We'll be right back.